What is happening, everybody? It's time for an early version of the MLB Live Before Lock show, Thursday slate, which, as per usual, we've got afternoon games, we've got night games. So we're going to have both of those slates covered. This is going to be the Live Before Lock. It's myself and Adam, and then later on, I'll be doing another show for the night slate. So like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. It goes a whole heck of a lot of way to help, because a lot of people ask, like, what could I do for free to support the YouTube channel? You just like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. It takes 5 seconds. Other than that, Adam, 6-game slate this afternoon. We've got Jacob deGrom pitching today. How are you feeling about it?
Pretty good. So, I mean, deGrom not on this slate, right?
Oh, do I have the? Oh yeah, never mind. I have the wrong one selected in Fantasy Cruncher. So
okay,
yeah,
I was about to say, because I am making a lot of lineups that don't have him, and that's concerning.
Yeah. No, Corbin Burnes pitching. I was getting the two mixed up, but yeah, Jacob deGrom tonight. Corbin Burnes going this afternoon. So Corbin Burnes, by far the best pitcher on the early slate, also has a tough matchup against the Dodgers, so that'll make for some interesting talking points. Also, today's show is sponsored by Prize Picks. We're going to be talking about them in a little bit, but let's start by talking about those pitchers, which I've already fucked up the entire show by saying it was Jacob deGrom. We've got a clear number one pitcher, at least in terms of pitcher quality and talent on the slate, in Corbin Burnes. He also has a really tough matchup against the Los Angeles Dodgers. He is projected for right around 40% ownership over on the DraftKings slate. So when it comes to Corbin Burnes, how are you going to weigh that him, number one, being by far the best pitcher on the slate in this really tough matchup against the Dodgers?
I think I'm still going to end up getting there. Like, I think he's going a little bit over-owned relative to his optimal lineup percentage, but clearly the most talented pitcher on the slate as well. So I still expect to get to plenty of him. He still projects as the top guy, slightly ahead of Wainwright, pretty far ahead of everybody else. So I still expect to be getting there and just hoping for the best.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, too, that we have to talk about when it comes to Corbin Burnes is, despite the tough matchup, it's, do we think he's going to score more fantasy points than guys like Luis Garcia, Logan Webb? And the answer to me is yes. Even if Corbin Burnes struggles relative to other Corbin Burnes starts, there's still an expectation, particularly if you guys look at our projections, where we have Corbin Burnes with a 37.4% chance to be one of the top 2 scoring pitchers on the slate. Over on FanDuel, we have a 15% chance to be the top scoring pitcher on the slate. And like we've said so many times as of late, the pricing has gotten so soft that it's not all that problematic to spend up to $10,500 for Corbin Burnes, the $11,300 on FanDuel. And then one other point to consider as well, there's no real opportunity cost in terms of missing out on another high-end pitcher. Like, I'm not dying to pay $9,500 for Andrew Heaney and Luis Garcia at $9,200. That's fine, but I'd just still rather play Corbin Burnes at $10,500 despite the matchup against the Dodgers.
Yeah, that's where I'm at as well. I think the opportunity cost point is a big one. And then the other thing is, it's not like the other options that are relatively appealing aren't getting ownership. Logan Webb's pulling 30%. Zach Gallen's pulling 25%. Garcia at 15%, I think, is only a little bit under-owned. But it's not like you look at any of these guys and say, like, oh, well, everybody's playing Corbin Burnes and nobody's playing this other good play. Like, they're all getting ownership.
Yeah, the only one that isn't, Luis Garcia, like you said, 15%. That's not all that much. The guy that's getting the lowest amount of ownership in this price range is Andrew Heaney. And it's really hard for me to back him because he's just not working deep into games. Even some recent starts where Heaney's looked really good, he hasn't gone past 5. He's only gone past 5 innings once this year. And his last handful of starts, 3 innings against the Royals, 4 2/3 innings against the Padres, 4 innings against the Giants, 4 innings against the Nationals. I think the Dodgers have found this role for Andrew Heaney where it's like, all right, he's had struggles with health this year. He's also been really inconsistent in the past, but he's always been a high upside pitcher with strikeout upside. And I think they've found a way to optimize his ability by just having him pitch 3 or 4+ innings. And I think that really caps his upside. But do you see it differently? Is there a path where we see Heaney pitch like 5, 6+ innings in this start and then actually produce upside?
So I'm a little confused. The blurb on DraftKings says that he left his last start early because he was hit by a line drive. It also says that it was against the Rockies, which it wasn't. So I'm not 100% sure what's going on there, but it does make sense if that's what happened in the start against KC, because he threw 81 pitches 2 starts ago, and then he only threw 60 in that last start. So I do think there's a decent chance that he goes deeper into this game, not necessarily, 6, 7 innings, but more than the 60 pitches he threw last time.
Yeah. So is what happened was I believe it was a bruise on the arm. It was considered a contusion. and they just took him out for precautionary reasons. I also don't think it helped that he was struggling in that start against the Royals. But I mean, your point is taken in terms of it's not that the pitch count's been like 50 or anything like that. He just hasn't been efficient with his pitches. But there's also a part of me that just kind of thinks that's how Heaney pitches, right? He kind of works around the edges. There's strikeouts to be had, but there's also a lot of walks. And even if we take that 3 inning start out, it's not like he's regularly been able to go deep into games. And the Dodgers do seem to have a pretty quick hook on him. And then one other point before I kick it back to you. The Dodgers don't really have a lot of need to extend their pitchers right now. They're leading the division by 1,000,000 games. It's something like a 16-game lead. And I just don't think that they're going to, especially with an injury to a pitcher like Kershaw, that they're going to risk anybody else by even having them come close to 100 pitches. So I think all of their pitchers are going to be somewhat restricted moving forward. So it's just hard for me to justify Heaney.
Yeah, I mean, I still think if you get around 80 pitches from Heaney on this particular slate, I think he's going a little bit under-owned just because he does have some of the best strikeout stuff, and the opportunity cost, like we were saying, just isn't really that high. He has a 32.3% strikeout percentage this year, 3.24 xFIP. The fact that he's only getting about 12% ownership does make him interesting to me in tournaments, just because I think that it's going to happen frequently enough where he throws 80, 85 pitches and just manages to beat most of these other pitchers in terms of raw points.
Yeah, I think that it is a small slate, so I could see where there would be a case for him. Not personally somewhere I'm getting. If I'm going to play a lower owned pitcher in the price range, I do have more of a preference towards Luis Garcia. We've mentioned, or at least you did before, all these pitchers are picking up some sort of ownership. 25% to Gallen, 38% to Wainwright, 30% for Logan Webb, 39% for Burnes. And then the two guys that are less than that, it's Heaney at 12%, Luis Garcia at 15%. Garcia is another pitcher who doesn't always work crazy deep into games, but he still has generally worked deeper into games than what we've seen out of Heaney. And then something else with Luis Garcia also, he's been pretty solid this year. He has had some bad luck. He's a 4.03 ERA, but a 3.43 expected ERA. So some reason to think that his underlying numbers suggest that he's going to be better moving forward. And there's strikeout upside there as well with a 25.4% K rate. So if I'm picking one guy to be overweight to in this price range, just based on ownership, it would be Luis Garcia for me. Do you see merits getting overweight to him?
I do, but I will say that I just finished what may or may not be my final crunch, and I barely got to either Heaney or Garcia.
Okay. Yeah. I don't think either of them are necessary, but if I am going to get overweight to one of them, it would be a preference towards Garcia. I'm curious, is there any particular reason you think that you didn't end up getting to him in that run?
I think just the gap in projection between him and then Burnes and Wainwright.
Okay.
And Dunning. I got basically I ended up playing, or I have a lot of Wainwright, Burnes, Dunning, and then a little bit just kind of spread out elsewhere, and then I'm pretty spread out on offenses.
And then what about the other two chalky starting pitchers that we brought up here, where Logan Webb's projected for 30% ownership, Gallen's projected for 25% ownership? They're going to be pitching against each other. They're both in the mid 8K range. Is there one of them that stands out above the other for you? Are they both good options, or neither of them?
So one other thing I just noticed as far as why I probably wasn't getting much Garcia, the White Sox are my second highest owned stack. So that can do it.
Yeah, so that will definitely be something that doesn't end up having you get to a lot of Luis Garcia. And, we'll talk more about the stacks in a little bit when we get there, but the White Sox right now are one of the more under-owned stacks we have in our top stacks tool. It's actually really funny looking at some of the leverage scores because it's like the top 5 teams with the top highest stack odds are all negatively leveraged, and then all the other teams are positively leveraged, which is going to make for some interesting decision points when we get there. But in terms of Logan Webb versus Zach Gallen, what do you make of both of them? I think both of them are more or less fair options.
Yeah, I think they're both fine. I'm getting less than both. I'm getting more Wainwright, more Dunning, and more Burnes than the field. And so as a result, getting less Webb and Gallen. But I do think that they're both good options. Pitching in San Francisco, we know is favorable, especially, the park limits power so well. And then both of these pitchers are pretty good. Webb doesn't have great strikeout stuff, only a 20.4% strikeout percentage, but also a 3.36 xFIP. Gallen has better strikeout stuff at 24%, 3.66 xFIP, but a little bit more difficult matchup against the Giants. I do think that they're both solid options. It's just that the way the ownership looks right now, I prefer just getting more of Burnes, Wainwright, Gallen, or not Gallen, Dunning.
Yeah, I think that's totally reasonable. And we're going to talk about Dunning. I guess we could bring up Dunning right now. There's two pitchers who are chalky at discount prices. One of them is Dane Dunning. project for just over 30% ownership. And then we have Wainwright at 38%. My preference of those two pitchers is Dunning, just because, number one, I do like his matchup better against Oakland. That's not to say that Wainwright has a tough matchup against the Rockies, because the Rockies suck, number one, against right-hand pitchers, also suck on the road, but there aren't that many strikeouts to be had in their lineup. They do at least a decent job of getting the bat on the ball. And Dane Dunning, I think, is at least a comparable pitcher to Adam Wainwright this season, and he's considerably cheaper. And then once again, I just like the matchup against Oakland. We're also getting a little bit of an ownership discount, 30.6% projected for Dunning compared to 37.9% for Wainwright. Is that more or less how you see it with Dunning, or is there just a different reason that you're getting to him?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same thing. I have a little bit less of him than Wainwright, but getting a lot of both. It's just a good spot against Oakland, and I think a pretty clear mispricing at 6K flat. He's thrown over 100 pitches in each of his last two starts. 20.3% strikeout percentage isn't great, but it's fine, especially for this slate and especially against Oakland. It's still slightly higher than Wainwright. It's basically the same as Logan Webb, who is $2,800 more expensive. And he's got a 3.98 xFIP, which, to your point, again, is basically the same as Wainwright's 3.9. Walks more guys than Wainwright, but that's about it. Very, very similar lines from these two, and you're getting a pretty nice discount going to Dunning. So I think that he's kind of just going to let you do whatever you want with bats and with the rest of your lineup.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are getting to Wainwright just because he's viewed as safe, right? Wainwright, there's a little bit of name value there. He has a matchup against the Rockies, and everybody knows that it's a team that isn't great against right-hand pitching. But once again, it's not a team that strikes out a whole bunch, and Wainwright has a 19.8% K rate this year. He's not generating a lot of swing and misses. Why is he not generating a lot of swing and misses? Well, because he's over the age of 40 and his average fastball velocity is now 88 miles per hour, right? That kind of limits the amount of hitters that you could strike out at the major league level. And looking through the game logs of Adam Wainwright, there's not that many games where he's had strikeout upside. He has, 5-6 starts the entire season where he's had more than 5 strikeouts. So I think Wainwright's very safe. I just don't know that he has the same upside as Dane Dunning, especially when you consider that he's $1,900 more expensive, and then also that he's so popular. So in terms of large field tournaments, I don't think Wainwright's unplayable by any means at his ownership, but it is a number that I prefer to be underweight to. So what do you make of Wainwright relative to his ownership, and do you have any concerns about his strikeout upside?
He's my highest owned pitcher right now.
Okay.
Not by a wide margin, but yeah, he just projects well. I have him as the second highest projected pitcher on the slate. The matchup is good against Colorado. They don't strike out a ton, like you said, but still a solid spot overall for Wainwright. And 7,900, it's more expensive than Dunning, but it doesn't really matter all that much. So I think he's easy to get to, and he's just one of the 3 guys that I'm playing a lot of.
Yeah, I mean, he's certainly not a bad play, but I do prefer to be underweight to him if he's going to be in the neighborhood of 40% owned. So just as a follow-up question, relative to his ownership, with him being a guy you're getting to a whole bunch, is it overweight to the field at the mark that he's at right now?
Yeah, I have 61%.
Okay. So yeah, that is a lot of
and so I think, really what it is for me, because I agree he's going over-owned, but I have him going over-owned by a similar proportion to Webb and Gallen and Dunning. So it kind of just defaults back to he projects better point per dollar than those guys. If I thought that Webb was going under-owned, maybe I would get more Webb or more Gallen or whatever. But when all those guys across the board I think are similarly over-owned, I'm going to just play the ones that project better.
Yeah, no, that's reasonable. So for me, because also I just use the data that we have over on the site where we do have, actually, I didn't realize we have Adam Wainwright projected higher than those guys right now, but just for my personal preference, when I build out lineups, I know my single entry lineup, my pitching combination was Corbin Burnes and Dane Dunning. That was who I landed on before the show. I haven't done another run of lineups to see where I land on these guys. But I mean, if you're playing a lot of Wainwright, maybe that will make me want to get to more Wainwright. But my preference would be to be underweight to the 38% mark. And then just talking about the rest of the pitchers on the slate, where we have anybody else that we haven't talked about yet is crazy low owned. Lucas Giolito, Zach Logue, Spencer Watkins, Adrian Sampson, Antonio Senzatella. None of these guys are great. Obviously, there's a track record, a point in time where Lucas Giolito was really good, but he's been not quite as good this year. He struggled with walks. The strikeout rate is down, and he's a really tough matchup against the Houston Astros. Is there any of these guys who are sub 5% owned that you do end up getting to in your builds?
Not really. Like, I think you could make the case for Giolito just based on talent, but like you said, it's a really tough matchup. His strikeout percentage is down this year, but it's still the third highest on the slate behind Heaney and Burnes. He still has a solid 3.67 xFIP, but it's just a really tough matchup against Houston. So, I think it's one of those where like 1-to-1, Giolito at 7,800 versus Wainwright at 7,900. Wainwright shouldn't be getting like 10 times the ownership if you were just looking at them directly compared to each other. But in the context of an entire lineup, I'm still just finding ways to be different and putting Wainwright in typically. So Giolito is the one that I think is worth a mention just based on talent.
I keep thinking there's a point where Giolito is going to turn it around, and then he just doesn't really. Individual starts, like, sure, he's made a bunch of starts against the Tigers this year. Some of those individual starts against Detroit have gone well. I know a couple of them haven't either, but it's not like he's strung together any kind of consistency. I wish I could look at his numbers and figure out what the issue was and try to figure out, like, all right, is there any reason for optimism when it comes to Lucas Giolito? But in general,
chat saying it too. I don't know what you're talking about. Like, he has a 3.67 xFIP this year. He's striking out 26% of hitters. He's fine.
He's fine, except he was one of the favorites to win the American League Cy Young coming into the season. So it's relative to expectations.
Yeah. He's not having the year he's had before, but like, he's having a good year.
Yeah. I mean, it relative to other pitchers, he's worth 1.2 wins above replacement. He has a 4.92 ERA, 4.21 expected ERA. So it's really just the fact that last year he had a 3.53 ERA, a 3.27 expected ERA. In terms of xFIP, the biggest issue I have with it is that it assumes that every pitcher has the same home run to fly ball rate. And I think it's pretty proven at this point in Giolito's career that he's an above average home run to fly ball rate pitcher. He's had an above average mark every single season of his career. So that's why I do think the FIP and the expected ERA are more accurate indicators of Giolito than xFIP, which just assumes, he's gotten unlucky with his home run to fly ball rate, which his home run to fly ball rate this year is 14.4%. It's 14.4% for his career as well.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
So that's probably the main reason I kind of disregard the xFIP with Lucas Giolito. It's hard because we have all these numbers for pitchers, and sometimes I kind of pick and choose which ones I care about the most. I'm looking at all of them. So I hear your point on Giolito, but that's really the main thing for me is just the home run to fly ball rate that I just don't think it should be league average. But I do think that Giolito, it's because everything's relative to expectations, right? There's sometimes we'll say, this guy's great, this guy sucks, but it's all based on what our prior opinions of that player were, right? So there might be like Russell Wilson last year for NFL. Like a lot of people are like, Russell Wilson sucked. It's like, well, it's not like he was Zach Wilson. He was just worse than what we've seen from other years out of Russell Wilson. So I do think a lot of our opinions, especially the way that we talk about players on shows, social media, chat, whatever it might be, like it is exaggerated to an extent for that reason.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. I just like on this slate, I think it's pretty clear that Giolito is still one of the most talented pitchers.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think if we're to group together all of the guys who have low ownership today, he's the best by a mile, like without really any kind of argument. Because the other guys who are sub 10% owned, it's Zach Logue, Spencer Watkins, Adrian Sampson, Antonio Senzatella. And these are guys that I just typically don't ever play on slates for any reason at all. So final talking point on pitchers before we move on. Amongst that other group of guys, do you see any reason to make any kind of real investment in any of them outside of just, this guy popped up in a lineup or two?
No, I mean, I'm pretty heavily concentrated on the three on Burnes, Wainwright, and Dunning.
Okay, today's show is sponsored by Prize Picks. And if you guys have not signed up at Prize Picks yet, make sure to sign up using the promo code AWESEMO, because if you do, you get up to $100 bonus on your first deposit. And your options: play over on Prize Picks with no free money, or play over on Prize Picks with up to $100 for free. It's a pretty easy choice, so make sure to sign up using that promo code AWESEMO. And then we also have a bunch of tools over at Stokastic.com. They're going to help you build some lineups over on Prize Picks. So stuff like Odd Shopper and also our player props tool, stuff that's going to give you percentage odds on the individual props winning. Good way to build some profitable player prop cards over on Prize Picks. So let's move on over to the offenses now. And you mentioned that you're getting to a lot of the White Sox. I think, if I'm not mistaken, you said they are your second most rostered offense today. So I'm curious, which team are you getting to the most?
Houston. So basically Houston, the White Sox, and Baltimore all in like the same range. Houston and Baltimore obviously pulling ownership. The White Sox are not.
Yeah, and It's because we just talked about Giolito 30 seconds ago, and we were talking about how he's a pitcher who maybe hasn't been quite as bad as the public says, but when it does go bad for him, it's via the home runs. And the last start that he made against Houston, not that this should be the end all be all, but you kind of saw what the downside is with Lucas Giolito. He pitched 5 innings, gave up 8 runs. He allowed a couple of homers in that game. And that's just what happens when Giolito pitches poorly. He gives up homers. He's had a bunch of starts this year where he's given up multiple homers. So he's going up against an offense that has a lot of firepower. Giolito's a pitcher that is prone to give up homers. So we currently have the Houston Astros with the second best top stack odds on the slate. I think they're a totally reasonable team to get to, especially when they're playing in Chicago, a hitter-friendly ballpark. And then, so I guess you're going to be pretty heavy on the offense on both sides if Houston's one side of your stack, and then you're getting to a lot of the Chicago White Sox going up against Luis Garcia on the other side. Is there anything you see individually that makes you optimistic about the White Sox, or is it just, hey, this is a decent offense that's low owned?
Yeah, pretty much just that. Garcia is not a pitcher that I typically like to target. 165 expected ISO to righties, 137 to lefties. But it's just that they're not getting much ownership, and they seem like they should be getting a little bit more. I'm playing popular pitchers and some other popular offenses. So the White Sox, I think, are a team that just really helped me balance that out.
Yeah, and in terms of the popular offenses today, there's a bunch of them. We've got teams that are picking up double-digit ownership. The Cubs, the Cardinals, the Rangers, the Astros, the Orioles. But the one that is the most popular by a pretty wide margin are your Baltimore Orioles, Adam, who I was thinking about this earlier, by the way. I don't know if you saw my tweet about Rutschman. He's been ridiculously good now. He's worth like 3 wins above replacements in 70 games, which is basically playing at an MVP caliber already. I think I might bet them to win the AL East next year. Getting a little ahead of ourselves because I don't know what the odds are going to be, but it's something that's on the back of my mind. But all that aside, the public is caught up to the Orioles now. This is the team that people are starting to gravitate towards. Nearly 18% projected ownership against Adrian Sampson. I get why this is a good spot for them, but I don't want to play 18% of the Baltimore Orioles because all things considered, it's not like this is one of the better offenses on this slate.
Yeah, I'm over the field on the Orioles. Of the popular teams, I'm pretty much around the field on all of them except the Cardinals. Just kind of worked out that way. But it looks like a good spot for Baltimore. 4.7 implied run total. They have close to they do have pretty much the best lineup they can run out there. Austin Hayes is back. You have Rutschman back after getting the day off yesterday. And Adrian Sampson's kind of just a run-of-the-mill pitcher. 178 expected ISO to righties, 118 to lefties, but only striking out 13% of lefties. And then one thing that I think is nice about Baltimore too, you mentioned Rutschman. Catcher's always a tough position to get hitters that you like. Rutschman takes care of that. Mullins is a good outfield option. Mountcastle's relatively inexpensive against Sampson. Urias and Vavra are pretty cheap. Hayes is pretty cheap. So like the only expensive guys in this lineup are Mullins, Rutschman, Santander. You're getting some nice power. You get some speed upside from somebody like Mateo if you go there at shortstop. So I'm actually getting to a little bit more Orioles than the field.
And is it more stacks of them or more of the players individually? Because I do think a lot of the players look good. I'm just not playing more than, well, at least I assume, because I build a lot of my lineups using the top stacks tool, that I'm not going to get overweight to the 18% aggregate ownership that we have on them.
I hadn't looked. Let me see.
Okay. Yeah, because where we have right now, at least in the top stacks tool, we do have the Orioles as being the most negatively leveraged team on the slate. And then the second most negatively leveraged team is the Chicago Cubs going up against Spencer Watkins. So we do have in the same game, the two most negatively leveraged offenses. We've got the Cubs are currently projected for 13.4% ownership as a team and then 18.3% on the aggregate for Baltimore.
31 5-man stacks of Baltimore for me.
Okay. 31% or just 31 total?
31 total, so about 20%.
Okay. Yeah, so a little bit overweight to the field, it looks like you are, but not anything really crazy. So then I'm kind of curious to ask you, as we go down and look at some of the really low-owned teams on the slate outside of the White Sox, there's the Dodgers, the Giants, the Brewers, the A's. Are these just teams that you're not really getting to that much if you are playing a lot of the Orioles and White Sox?
Yeah, I'm not getting to much LA. I'm not getting to much Milwaukee. I'm kind of close to the field there. But basically just don't have Oakland, don't have Arizona, don't have San Francisco, barely have St. Louis. St. Louis is the team that I'm pulling a lot of that ownership from for whatever reason. But yeah, so basically around the field on all the other popular teams and then playing a lot of the White Sox.
Yeah, and in terms of what you're saying about the Cardinals as a stack, here's why that makes sense to me against Senzatella. I don't think Senzatella is good at all, But if you look at his numbers, he's a very heavy ground ball pitcher. He's not a guy that's typically giving up games where it's like, oh, like multiple home runs and 6, 7 runs giving up by Senzatella. And this is even with him making half of his starts at Coors Field. These are the earned runs that he's allowed in his most recent starts: 3, 2, 3, 3, 3, 3. And he's only allowed multiple homers once the entire season. So it's very unlikely to me that Senzatella has a good game, but I think the most likely outcome is it's like 6 innings, 3 runs, 2 strikeouts, and 0 or 1 homers allowed. I think that's almost every single start for Senzatella, which is massively unappealing for DFS to roster him. But generally, stacking against him doesn't really pay off with a high upside either.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm kind of surprised I'm not getting to more St. Louis just because I do think there's some value here. Like you have Nootbaar leading off again at 2,400. You have Donovan hitting second with multi-position eligibility. Gorman's good. Carlson got back up to the 7 hole after hitting 9 yesterday, which is nice. So I'm kind of surprised I'm not getting more ownership than I am, but I think it's just that I sort of had to give up a team somewhere. And while Goldschmidt and Arenado are both clearly very good hitters, they're also really expensive in the middle of that order. And so I think maybe the value component is just not quite as favorable for the Cardinals as it is for other teams. And then there's also, 5 guys here pulling 10+% ownership. If I look at Baltimore, it's even more than that, but a lot of them are a lot better values. So I think it might just be a little bit that the Cardinals are maybe a little bit less point per dollar value than some of these other teams.
Yeah, we've got Gray in the chat is saying you can't forget about the Giolito game day narrative. You know why I can forget about it? Because I never knew about it to begin with. I don't even know if that's a good or a bad thing for Giolito. I have no clue what the Lucas Giolito day game narrative is. Is he supposed to be good in day games or bad or mediocre? I have no clue.
I have no idea.
All right, let's look this up. Great. What's this narrative supposed to be? What is Giolito? By the way, if anybody has questions, you can throw them into the Discord channel. We'll answer them. That's one of the benefits of being a subscriber over at Stokastic.com. Beyond getting access to all the tools like the top stacks tool, the top pitchers tool, you also get to ask us questions in the Discord channel, and we'll be answering them on shows fairly regularly, trying to push that a little bit more often because it did fall by the wayside a little bit. And it doesn't have to just be baseball-related questions. I know Seth likes to ask a lot of questions that are mostly nonsense and just trolling me and asking me about favorite foods and asking me if I was a mistake, if my parents had planned me. But whatever it is that you guys enjoy, you could throw me those questions over in Discord. And if you're signing up at Stokastic for the first time, make sure to sign up using the promo code MLB Live because it's going to get you 50% off your first week of subscription. So you might as well save that money when you're signing up. Just make sure to use the promo code MLB Live. That's all one word in all capital letters. All right, let's see. What are these dumb numbers for Lucas Giolito? And what are the odds that this is more than like a 15-inning sample size, Adam?
15 inning?
Yeah.
Well, I assume they're talking about his career. So.
Oh, I would find that to be very unlikely. Let's say.
I do vaguely remember there being something about him in day games. I just don't know what it is because I don't care.
Let me see if this is on Fangraphs. This is something I've never looked at once.
It's on Baseball Reference for sure.
Is it on? All right, so I'll look up Baseball Reference. Let's take a guess. Is Lucas Giolito better or worse in day games? Lucas G. All right, so Baseball Reference. I assume it's in splits.
Yeah, I think so.
Baseball Reference. All right, so while I'm looking this up, I'm curious because you're not really on a lot of these low-owned teams. It seems like outside of the White Sox. Are there any of these really low-owned stacks, though, that you do find yourself getting overweight to, whether it's the Dodgers or any of these teams that are like sub 5% owned, picking up really low ownership? So this would be teams in this group: the Dodgers, the Giants, the Brewers, the A's, the Diamondbacks, the Rockies. Do any of those teams stand out to you for any reason in large field tournaments?
No, not really. I mean, well, for me personally, like out of all those teams, I'm just getting to the White Sox. I think that I think the Dodgers and Brewers, you could make a case for either of them in large field tournaments just because they do have a lot of power in their lineup. Obviously more for the Dodgers, but also a more difficult matchup against Burnes. So there is upside there. I think that, they are going a little bit under-owned. So I think you can make that case. It's more difficult for me to make a case for, one of the offenses in San Francisco or for like the A's.
All right. I've got Lucas Giolito's page up. We've got the splits pulled. Looking at the career. See, where first half, second half, that's month by month, wins, losses. But is there anything dumber than looking up the splits for pitchers and wins and losses? Like, yeah, no shit, they're better when they're pitching in wins than when they're pitching in losses. I'm scrolling. Yeah, I can't find where this is listed in splits. Greg, if you're still in chat, what is this Lucas Giolito narrative that I don't care about? Yeah, I care about it now because I don't care about it so much. Like, I need to know. It's like a scab. I can't stop picking at. And I can't find this. There is so much information I don't care about that's listed in Baseball Reference.
Oh yeah, like any random stat that you might want to look up is in there.
Imagine trying to build lineups or placing bets based on how a pitcher does in interleague games. Like, oh, how does he usually do against this? Oh, here we go. Day games. All right. So Lucas Giolito in day games. All right. So for his career, he has pitched 275 innings in day games. He has pitched 505 innings in night games. He has a 3.66 ERA in day games, 4.65 in night games. So he has been better in the day. Let's see, what is the strikeout rate? I wish there was also more numbers I cared about listed here. 298 strikeouts. So about a strikeout per. It's funny. The underlying stats don't look that much different. It's just the ERA is different.
Yeah, which again probably means you shouldn't care.
Which probably means nothing at all. So Lucas Giolito. If you guys want to play Lucas Giolito because it's a day game, go ahead. If I was to pick one reason to roster Lucas Giolito today, it would be because, well, this is two reasons. The ownership and then also all of the other pitchers just kind of suck. In terms of low ownership, there's nobody else at 5% on that I think is anywhat decent. So that to me would be the reason to play Giolito. But if you're getting to him because you think he's better in day games and night games, go ahead, be my guest. So in terms of your lineups now, Adam, as you're looking over it, is there anything that's standing out to you as being different than what you thought it was going to be before?
I didn't really have too much of a basis of what I expected it to look like because I just kind of sat down and started building lineups. But certainly wouldn't have expected to get to the White Sox. I think that it makes some sense given the ownership, but kind of like we talked about before, I have no real confidence in it because I do think Garcia is a good pitcher and I think the White Sox kind of suck. But they do have a lot of talent in their lineup. They are relatively inexpensive top to bottom, so you can build strong lineups around them as well. I'm uploading my lineups now to just see like what my actual individual exposures look like. But that's what really surprised me. Other than that, like I'm pretty much just playing chalk, it looks like.
All right. We've got, look at, so Seth comes through, who, by the way, this is how much of a troll Seth is. His avatar in our Discord channel is EMac smiling. It's always some different version of EMac, but he did ask us an actual baseball question, which is appreciated every once in a while. He does like to ask baseball questions. He asked me like 5 questions yesterday, and only one of them was a baseball question. It's kind of the same question he asked today. So yesterday he asked about the Rangers, and today he's asking about the Rangers again. He wants to know which Rangers that we are prioritizing in Rangers stacks. So let me pull up fantasy.
Seager's my highest owned Ranger, followed by Heim. Actually, I have Seager and Heim the exact same amount. Semien just behind them. So those 3 are really leading the way. And then it's like Garcia, Duran.
Is there anything about your Rangers stacks that you think differentiates them from where the rest of the field you expect to be with Texas?
A lot of them, it looks like, are paired with the White Sox.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair enough. That's something that other people aren't going to be doing.
So like I just pulled up, let's see. So lineups that have, we'll say Seager, Heim, Semien. So looking through these, paired with the White Sox, paired with the Brewers, paired with the White Sox, random one-offs. Yeah, a lot of just Texas mixed with the White Sox.
Yeah, I mean, if you have White Sox in any of those lineups, that already is going to be vastly different than what other people are doing with Texas. But looking at the Rangers right now in terms of their projected ownership, we do have it's pretty big splits in terms of the guys who are popular are all around 20%, and the guys that aren't are really low owned. So Bubba Thompson, Leody Taveras, Mark Mathias, Ezekiel Duran, those guys are all well under 10% owned. And then you've got Adolis Garcia, Marcus Semien, Corey Seager, Nate Lowe, and Jonah Heim, all projected right around 20% ownership. Of those guys, I haven't finalized my lineups yet. I've been playing less of Marcus Semien than the field. I don't know if that'll be the case necessarily today, just because he is only 4,300 and the 20% ownership. It's a little bit different. Like recent slates, we've had Semien at like 30% projected ownership on 13 game slates. I don't really think the 20% on a 6 game slate is that big of an issue, though.
No, neither do I. It actually looks like Lowe is the popular guy here that I'm getting less of. I only have like 7%. So I think I'm just kind of replacing him in a lot of lineups with like Jose Abreu or Ryan Mountcastle or something.
Yeah, we've got, oh, by the way, shout out to Blitz, who brought up that she's upset with Oakland for dropping Andrus. That was a little bit weird to me because he's one of the only decent players on the team. And that's not to say that Elvis Andrus is great, and he's definitely past prime. But if they didn't want him, I would think there would have been a market for him at the trade deadline. Like he's an above average veteran player. He's a 97 WRC plus. So in terms of offense, right around league average, but then he's a plus defender. He could play shortstop. So he's worth 1.6 wins above replacement. It's a little weird to me that they didn't move him at the trade deadline and then just cut him as soon as the trade deadline ended. They still did the same thing with Steven Piscotty also. Knowing the A's, it's probably some way to save money. But right. I mean, this team is so annoying.
Yeah, I didn't even realize that they had released him.
Yeah, they released Andrus and they released Piscotty. And
yeah, I knew about Piscotty. But yeah, you're probably right. Money is typically the answer.
Here's my feelings on a team that if you are fielding or you own a professional sports team and your entire reasoning is to do everything you can to improve your bottom line, which I get it, it's a business. But if it comes at the expense of your product where you've traded off or released your entire major league roster, you just shouldn't be allowed to own a baseball team. And then you know what's going to happen next is they're trying to build that new stadium and be like, oh, cool, but it has to be 80% funded by the city.
Right. Or they're going to move to Vegas.
Yeah. Which, I mean, like, cool, move to Vegas. I think it'd be cool to have a baseball team in Vegas. But there's no bigger scam in sports than owners who are worth a shit ton of money being looking for a handout for the public and trying to convince them it's going to be great for their lives. Like, oh, this is great for business, when there's a ton of research that's been done that it does no substantial effects on the businesses around the stadium. So something like the Super Bowl, for instance, where teams would be like, oh, if we build the stadium here, we're going to be able to have the Super Bowl. It's like, all right, cool. That's going to help you for one weekend once every 20 years. It's the biggest scam going in sports right now, that owners have found a way to convince the public that it's reasonable for them to pay for new stadiums so that they can make more money.
Yep. Baltimore just managed to do something like give a bunch of money to the Orioles too.
There you go. And then people get, from the public who are like, oh, we don't want to lose our sports team, so we're just going to go pay for it. Just shouldn't be the expectation.
Yeah.
All right.
And it's not even, I mean, it wasn't even like the Orioles directly. They're just building up, like, I think they're turning it into like the Camden Sports Complex or something. So I don't know what they're doing with it, but yeah, it's like cool. Like for me personally, I'm sure it'll be cool because I assume they're just going to build up like more stuff to do around the actual stadium, but it's like a horrible use of money.
Yeah, I like this conspiracy theory from Pinstripe Pimp. He's saying moving out of Oakland is exactly what they want. The city refused to pay, so they are tanking. I think it's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. Like, I don't think they hate that they're tanking with everything going on, but I also just think that because the city is opted to not pay for a new stadium, the owner's like, well, I'm just going to be really cheap right now. So he's not spending money on the team. That's really what I think it is. Like, the things go hand in hand also, but it's annoying when I see it happen. We've got other questions in the Discord channel here. We've got from Stephen L57. Any thoughts on playing the A's and leveraging against Dunn, even as a secondary stack? So in terms of 5-man stack, I think Oakland's very unnecessary. If you have lineups that don't have Dane Dunning, yeah, there's going to be individual players that you could use to save salary, maybe get some more Corbin Burnes, get some more Astros or a team you're paying up for. But I'm kind of light on the idea of the A's as a 5-man stack because I just think the salary savings are totally unnecessary.
Yeah, and they're clearly just really, really bad. I have virtually no Oakland. If you wanted to play some Sean Murphy or Seth Brown or one of the, so this is another thing, you kind of can't stack Oakland. They have 3 catchers. And they're all guys that you would actually want to play. Like if you're playing Oakland, you want Murphy, you want Langoliers, you want Stephen Vogt, and they all play the same position. Seth Brown is kind of like the only guy that doesn't play catcher on Oakland that I would really like individually. But, if you get to one of those catchers, you get the Brown, maybe you use like Stevenson leading off at 2K. Any of that's fine, but I agree with you. It's just pretty unnecessary, I think, to be playing like 5 of these guys together, especially when 3 of them can't be played together.
Yeah, which is also, I think it was Eric who was in the chat who said it earlier. But yeah, we have a 9-man lineup for the A's, and 3 of them on DraftKings are only catcher eligible. And Sean Murphy is clearly the best of those guys. I played a bunch of Langoliers. I think that's how you pronounce his name last night as a one-off because he was min price and he homered, so it worked out yesterday. But still, it's really hard to justify a 5-man stack for the A's because even if you are doing that, like there's only so many combinations of them you can make when 33% of the lineup is catcher. So if you're playing Sean Murphy as your catcher, which I think is by far the best catching option on the team, and I don't think that should be any pushback from anybody else, then you only have a few other guys to stack him with. And a lot of people are going to land on the same A's. And then people are going to be paying up for Corbin Burnes, paying up for the same payoffs. It's totally unnecessary to stack the A's. I get if you look at our top stacks tool, they're going to pop up as having really high top value odds because they're all so cheap. But we have to look at it in the context of the slate, and the salary savings get you almost nothing today.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you're just saving money on bats for really no reason.
We've got from Perrin, any thoughts on the Cubs against Baltimore today as a main stack? So I definitely think they are a team worth getting to. I suspect I'm going to end up coming in a little bit underweight to the field on them against Spencer Watkins. We currently have higher top stack odds on the Rangers, the Astros, and the Orioles as chalky teams. So I don't think the Cubs against Watkins are necessarily a bad stack, but it's not my number one go-to stack on the slate. And the Cubs are also getting to be somewhat expensive for how bad their offense actually is.
Yeah, I'm around the field on them. I do think they're a good stack. Watkins is kind of a tough one to talk about because I don't think he's a particularly good pitcher, but then somehow he continues to just pitch relatively well. He's primarily had issues with right-handed power, though, 239 expected ISO, and you should have plenty of right-handed power in this lineup. Assuming Wilson Contreras is playing, he's really expensive at 5,900, but salary isn't really difficult to come by today, and he's going to look like a good catcher option. Suzuki and Reyes look good individually. Happ, Madrigal, Horner are all fine as well. So I do like the Cubs still. I'm getting around the field. I personally actually think that I'm getting about the same aggregate ownership to the Cubs as the Rangers, but I do disagree with, I guess, somewhat with our top stacks tool here, just because of the way that I look at it. It's more by like optimal percentage. And so I actually have the Cubs a little bit higher. And I think a big reason is probably Contreras at catcher being such a good play. So kind of splitting hairs there. I still think Texas is one of the best stacks as well, but I'm a little bit higher on the Cubs.
Yeah, and a follow-up from BK in the Discord channel said, don't forget about all the real estate opportunities that come with opening up a new ballpark for the owners. You know who did that is Dan Gilbert, who owns Cleveland. I'm pretty sure he built a new arena in Cleveland, and then it got number one, if I'm not mistaken, publicly funded. And then he bought all of the cheap real estate around the stadium, but only directly around the stadium. And then that stuff went up in value. So it was like he found a way to get it publicly funded while also making more money for himself. So yeah, just amazing. It was a while ago, so I might be a little bit incorrect on that because it was like, 10, 12 years ago, but something along those lines happened. Super chat from Gabriel Meffrin wanted to say, I've been at a new job and haven't been able to tune much these days, but I'm happy to be back today. Appreciate your analysis as always. Gabriel, number one, congrats on the new job. I hope that's going well. And thank you for the super chat. And we appreciate you tuning in. Matt. Oh, never mind. I thought I was saying something else about Dan Gilbert. It looks like we've answered all the questions here and we've gotten to 1 o'clock. So if there's no other questions here, guys, that is going to do it for the show today. Thank you very much for watching. Like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Don't forget to check out all the other content we have coming up today. We're going to have MLB Live Before Lock tonight for the later slate, and that is the one that Jacob deGrom is going to be pitching on. And then also got the NFL Live Before Lock for the NFL preseason slate. So check that out tonight. And then once again, just like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit the notification bell so you know when all of our shows go live. Good luck this afternoon, guys, and I'll see you again tonight.